All right, so let's talk about the ex-husband. Alrighty, so we are now on episode 7. And episodes 7 and 8 are going to be about the meat of. Episodes 7 and 8 are going to be about the main characters in this whole process, and that will be my husband and myself. So, episode 7 is entitled The Husband because I'm going to be talking about my husband in this episode. And then next episode will be 8, and I will be talking about myself and how I deal with all of the things that I have to deal with as it pertains to a caregiver, but then as it pertains to my life as a whole and all of the components that make up my life. So I met the husband in 2010, end of August, beginning of September of 2010. It turns out that we actually attended the same high school. He was a couple of years behind me. We never met in high school. I never had a clue that he existed while I was in high school, which is so very funny because the social club that he hung out with is the same social club that I hung out with because I dated one of the founders of the social club. So, but I don't remember seeing him in this group, and it could be because I was so infatuated by the guy that I was dating at the time, but I don't recall him being a part of the school. I don't recall him being a part of that group or any of that. But we met in the end of summer, beginning of fall 2010, right before school started back, because that social club actually had their first annual picnic. And we were invited. I was invited because I was one of the young ladies that was not necessarily a part of a crew, but I was one of the ones that was active in planning my class reunion. But the person that invited me actually graduated the year before I did. So anyway, we're at the barbecue. The person that invited me had to leave to go pick up what he called his little brother, which I knew was not his blood brother, but he looked at him as a little brother. And it turns out that it was my husband. And like I said, I did not know who he was, had never met him in high school, don't recall seeing this man at all. And at the picnic, he was very, very flirtatious. But he wasn't flirtatious with just me, he was flirtatious with all of the women. So I didn't think anything of it. He was also funny. So I got to laugh a lot. And he had asked me at one point to make him a plate. And I was like, dude, we're not dating. I don't make men plates that I'm not dating. You're not my husband, you're not my boyfriend, you're not even a person that I brought to the function. I don't even know you. So no, I'm not making you a plate. And what I ended up doing was not making him a plate, but putting certain things on his plate that he wanted and he couldn't get to himself, or it would be easier for him to just hold the plate and me put some of the stuff on there because it had gotten kind of heavy. So anyway, we're conversing throughout the night, but like I said, he was flirting with everyone. He was the center of attention. He was the life of the party. He was all over the place. So I didn't pay a whole heck of a lot of attention to him, but I did notice him because he made himself noticeable. And I will say this, that prior to me attending this event, I had just ended a relationship, and I've got the quotation marks, the air quotes up for those who are listening to this versus watching this. And I had ended that relationship, and I had prayed about it and said, you know what, if that person was not my husband, then make it so I don't love them in that way. Make it so I don't give them the benefits that a husband would get. Make it so I am able to move on to the next person that would be my husband. And at the time, I had finally come to terms with the fact that I may get married again, but I didn't really want to get married again. I had ended my first marriage. I was okay with being single. I was okay with dating. I was all right with not having someone to be accountable to. Although there were several men, 1, 2 in particular, that really wanted me to be accountable to them. And I couldn't do it. 3 actually. 1 actually wanted to get married, and I said no. So when I got to this picnic, I had just come through that cleansing. I had just come through that refreshing. I had just come through that awakening and realization of, this is my life. I'm going to do what I want to do and enjoy it the way that I want to enjoy it. And at this point, I had already cut my hair off. I had cut my hair off the year before. So I was almost a full year into being bald. And I mentioned that because one of the ways that my now husband had me classified in his phone was Baldy, because he, 1, could not remember how to pronounce my name, and 2, had no clue how to spell it, even when he did figure out how to pronounce it. So, and even to this day, he struggles with it. To be quite honest, he struggles with it. So we met that weekend, and something that I had started doing was taking, when the kids went back to school, I would take that week off from work so that I could have that time to myself and not be worried about getting them to and from school and having to go to work and all of that stuff, getting them acclimated to being back in school. So I had taken that week off, and I just needed to decompress and be in the house by myself without the interruption of the children, and just do whatever it was that I wanted to do. Go enjoy myself if I wanted to, whatever I needed to do during that time, that's what I wanted to do. So anyway, I had taken that week off. So the picnic was that weekend, the barbecue was that weekend, and that following week was the start of school. So that following week I was going to be off. So he and I talked on the phone the entire weekend, and agreed to get together that week. Now, mind you, I'm leaving a part out. So after the picnic, I was ready to go. And not the picnic, I keep calling it a picnic, but it was a barbecue. After the barbecue, at a certain point in the barbecue, I decided it was time for me to go. I wasn't going to hang out too late. I didn't really want to be out super late. And I was just ready to go. He swears that he told me to let him know before I left. And I don't recall him saying it. And even if he had, I more than likely would not have. Because that's just not how I operated. As I said, I did not make him a plate because he was not my husband. He was not my boyfriend. He was not someone I was dating. I hadn't even brought him to the function. So I didn't feel like I needed to keep him abreast of what was happening in my life in that moment. So I left. And he found me on Facebook. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt and sent him my telephone number, and we talked the entire weekend. And went out the following week enjoyed ourselves just spending time with one another. We interacted with other people, but for the most part, we spent time getting to know each other during that time. He was open and honest with me. I was open and honest with him. Let him know that I wasn't looking for anything serious. I was fine being single and just dating. I was good. But it ended up being more than that. Almost right away. So we became inseparable from the first date on. Now his phone is ringing and I'm trying to decide if I want to go get it or if I want it to just ring. I'll be right back. Okay, I'll let it ring. So we became inseparable, and I got to meet his family, his sister rather, and her children, because that's really all he had was his sister and her children. His mom had passed away the year before, and he got to meet my family, my children, my grandparents, and my mom, and it was pretty serious from the beginning. But I also knew from the beginning that there were going to be some problems, because it was very clear that he was quite self-centered. He was used to doing his own thing. He was used to not having to check in with anyone. He had never been married before in his life. And the relationships that he had prior, it was his way or no way. Or they would argue about it. And that's not something that I was used to. He would throw what I call tantrums and want to cuss and fuss, and thought that if he did it enough, I would eventually cave in. And to start, I did not. To start out, I did not. I made it clear that that's not who I am. That's not the kind of person that I like to interact with. That's not the kind of relationships that I like to have. So it got better. It got better. So we're talking September, we're talking October. By November, he's telling me that I am his wife. He knows this. We are going to get married. And I told him no. I was fine with not being a wife. But then something happened. I went to the funeral of the pastor that I grew up with. And I kid you not, when in the midst of those services, the spirit was high. And if you come from a church background, specifically a charismatic, if you will, church background, so Pentecostal, Church of God in Christ, even Baptist, then you understand what I say when I say the spirit was high, meaning the Holy Ghost was in the building, the Spirit of the Lord was there, and people were rejoicing. There were some that were dancing, there were some that were speaking in tongues of other languages, the unknown language that only the heavenlies can understand. So the Spirit was high. And at one point during that, I clearly heard God say that this man was my husband. And I was like, no, can't be. But that was me being rebellious talking. But true enough, I did hear him say that this man was my husband. So I went back home and had the conversation with him and agreed to marry him. But I told him it could not be a long, drawn-out engagement. If we were going to do it, we needed to do it fairly quickly, because I've been in a long engagement before. I've been in a long relationship that lasted 6 years and then got married finally and was married for 6 years. So I knew that it could not be a long engagement. I was not going to have that again, but also because I knew that God did not want it that way. We were not going to be living in the same household, interacting like a married couple, but not being married. And by this point, if you remember the last episode where I talked about my ex-husband and how he didn't want to move in with me when I had my apartment, because he just didn't believe in that kind of thing. By the time I got to my second husband, my mind had become that. I had become more in line with what it was that God wanted me. Even though I was not a saint, I was a Christian trying to get my life back together. And so I knew that it couldn't be a long engagement. I knew that we were not going to be shacking, just living together. So we ended up getting married Valentine's Day of 2011. So, timeline. We met in August. We went out on our first date the first week of September. And we were together from that point on. And he had been telling me that he wanted to get married, and I kept saying no. But then he finally said to me in November that I was going to be his wife. And then he said, and then the pastor passed away, and I agreed to be his wife. And we were married in February. So we're talking not even full of August, the end of August, September, October, November, December, January, February. We're talking 5 to 6 months top between first meeting and getting married. And things went back to where they were before. I made it clear that I was not the kind of woman that would tolerate the foolishness. So he went back to being selfish. He went back to being aggressive. He went back to being boisterous. He went back to being immature. Now, I will say this. He is not the bad guy in this. Because I was no saint. And I'm not saying that I was rude or indifferent or disrespectful or any of those things, but I am not necessarily the easiest person to live with either. I am one that has enjoyed being in control of things, not necessarily because it's what I wanted, but it was because it was what I was used to. I was used to being the one in control. I was used to being the one that everyone came to for answers and solutions. I was used to that. So that put me at a certain level that he was not used to as far as women being in control, other than his mother. And that became a point of contention for us. That became a butt heads kind of situation. And he wanted it his way, and I was saying, no, I am willing to compromise, but it's not going to be solely your way. It's not going to be solely my way. We can compromise. We can come to a midpoint. And as years went on, actually not even years, by the time we got to our second year, I knew that if we did not get counseling, it was not going to be a good thing. So we did get counseling, and the counselor basically told us that we would not make it to year 5 because of how we were going at each other and what his, I don't want to call him Neanderthal, but his old-fashioned way of thinking about what a man is to do and what a woman is to do, the roles that he had in his mind about what a woman can and cannot do, should or should not do. His thinking was very old-fashioned. He thought it was all right for a man to, flirt with other women. He thought that that was okay, and that the woman should be all right with it. The woman, being his wife, should be okay with it. And I was not that person. I was not okay with it. Having gone through being cheated on once before with a husband, by a husband, I was not okay with the possibility of being cheated on again. He was okay with being loud and argumentative. He was okay with feeling like he had to do certain things to demonstrate his machismo and talk to me a certain way and talk to the children a certain way. But if I gave that same thing back to him, it was a problem. So, and I was all for giving that thing back to him because it just needed to be done. He needed to know that he couldn't talk to me a certain way, and I can dish it just as well as I can take it. And by the time we got to the counselors, they were saying, yeah, you guys aren't going to make it to 5 years. You're just not. The way that he looks at money, the way you look at money, the way he looks at how the children should be treated and raised, the way versus the way you do, the way that he feels like he should be able to do whatever it is that he wants to do, and you have to run everything by him, you're not going to make it to year 5. Year 5 is not going to happen for you. So we proved them wrong. We made it past there. And it was a hot mess. It's been a hot mess since then. But he is my husband. I am his wife. We love one another. We care for one another in the emotional sense. Now, when it comes to the physical and his ailments and why I am his caregiver. So right after we got married, I put him on my insurance because mine was better. He went to get his physical, got everything checked up. The doctor told him that he was borderline diabetic. And she told him that he needed to do certain things to keep it from coming on. And he did not listen. So we went back. She said, okay, you are diabetic now. Here's the medication. Take this medication. Do the things that the dietitian tells you to do. Exercise, things of that nature. And come back in 3 months. And if you do all of these things, then you'll avoid being on 2 pills. Well, again, he didn't listen, and he also didn't take his medications the way that he's supposed to. So he ended up on 2 pills for diabetes and 1 for high blood pressure. And she says, if you do these, take this medication the way you're supposed to, do what the dietitian tells you to do, and exercise, we can avoid you being on insulin shots. And once again, he did not listen. He did not follow directions, and he ended up on insulin shots. So this all happened within the first 2 years of us being married. Within the first 2 years of us being married. And he never did what he was supposed to do as far as his diabetes is concerned. He never took the medications consistently. He didn't do the things that the dietitian told him to do as far as measuring the food out and how much he's supposed to eat for his size, his height. He didn't do those things consistently. And he felt like because he was a grown man, he should be able to do whatever he wanted to do. Eat it the way he wanted to eat it. He was married now. He should be able to get fat and do whatever it is that he wanted to do. And that led him to being in a bout of uncontrolled diabetes, where nothing really worked. And that was going on for so long that it became another illness, and we didn't realize what this illness was. We just started seeing it happen. He was having terrible stomach pains, terrible stomach pains, and he began losing weight, and we did not know why. Now by this time, he is with another doctor. He has a new doctor, and this doctor is through his insurance because it was better for him to be on his insurance at that point. And this doctor just kept saying, you know, we'll do your blood work, we'll get your A1Cs down, we'll get your sugars down. You need to lose the weight anyway because you're too short for the kind of weight that you had on you. So it's good that you're losing the weight. Now go upstairs and get your A1C checked. Listen to what the dietitian is saying. And he left it at that. So this went on for a good, probably 6 months, and my husband is steadily losing weight. The husband is steadily losing weight. And it got to a point where it's like, okay, this actually looks good on you. The way that you've gotten rid of this looks good on you. Now you're nice and you still got your muscular build, but there's not so much. He had gotten so big that I used to call him my little Oompa Loompa because he's 1, shorter than me by an inch. And then 2, he just became round. And I was like, you kind of look like an Oompa Loompa. And it's not in a bad way. I think it's actually kind of cute, but at the same time, I know that this is dangerous for you. So when he started losing the weight, It was good. The doctor thought it was good. I thought it was good. But we knew that something wasn't right because the weight was coming off too fast. I bought him a suit that looked really good on him for the matter of probably a month. And by the next month, the suit was too big. That's just how fast he was losing weight. And I'm saying by the next month, but it was more than likely within the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it no longer looked good on him. And we're, what's going on? And we're going back to the doctor, and we're going to the hospital, and he's getting checked out, and they're all saying, well, you need to lose the weight, you need to lose the weight. And nobody is testing him for anything beyond the uncontrolled diabetes. And on top of that, he went to urgent care one day, and they said, you need to go to the hospital. That's what you need to do. You need to go to the hospital. And he's like, no, I'm not going. So he didn't go. So at this point, we're talking, it's 2017. He and I married in 2011. We had started noticing the weight loss in 2016. So by this point, we have decided to relocate and move to Texas. And I'm looking at my husband trying to pack up our apartment, load up the truck, wear himself out, because now he's clearly no more than 110, 115 pounds. Clearly, if that. And he's weak, and he's tiring very easily, and his stomach is still hurting. So we drive from Chicago to Texas, and we get here in April. And we gone to the ER probably that second week that we made it here. We had gone to the ER because he was in so much pain. And we went to the ER again because he was in so much pain, and they kept him for a couple of days, and then they'd send him, home, and he's in so much pain, and he's losing so much weight, and he's so weak. And at one point he actually suffered from heat stroke because it was so hot where we were staying. The AC was not working in the room that we were in, and we were in someone's house, and the AC wasn't working, and he basically had heat stroke. So we ended up sleeping on the sofas that night. He was incoherent. He was babbling, lethargic, all of the things that say you could possibly die. And he's going to the ER, and they're giving him one diagnosis. Yeah, we know you've got the uncontrolled diabetes, you need to get it under control. But then they said, well, maybe it's irritable bowel syndrome because you are having issues with being able to eat, and your stomach is really bothering you when you eat certain foods. And yeah, maybe that's what it is. So they put him on medication for that. And then we had an episode where it got so bad he had to go into the hospital for 5 days. Now, we just moved here in April. I just started working. I hadn't been on the job a full month yet. And he's in the hospital for 5 days. So I'm taking off work to go sit with him in the hospital. And I'm like, wow, how am I supposed to do this? How on earth am I supposed to make this happen and keep my job? So he's there for 5 days. They finally give him the diagnosis of gastroparesis, which is basically his stomach muscles basically stop working or work less than what they should. And so he wasn't processing the food. And because he wasn't getting the nutrients in, he was losing the weight. Because he wasn't eating, he was losing the weight. No nutrients, no eating, you're losing muscle mass, you're losing weight, you don't have the energy nor the strength, and it's a painful disease. So the uncontrolled diabetes led to the gastroparesis, and once they finally did a full-blown test of the gastroparesis and did an endoscopy and a colonoscopy, it turns out that he also had diverticulosis. And then he also developed GERD because the food just kept coming back up. So we're talking diabetes, gastroparesis, diverticulosis, GERD, all of that equating to starvation. And what does starvation lead to? Death. So from the point of 2011 actually, to now, I have been my husband's caregiver. I have run back and forth to the hospital. We've gone back and forth to the ER. I have been to almost all of his doctor's appointments. I have heard everything that the doctors have told him to do and how to do it, and I have watched him go the opposite direction. Even up until right now, present day. He will not 100% do what it is that the doctors are telling him to do. So he'll get to a point where he can't take it anymore, and we go to the ER and they get him well, and they say, well, you got to stay here for a few days, and that few days might be 3, and before he can get to the 3rd day, he's checking himself out because he feels good now. They've got his sugar levels together. He's rehydrated. The yeast that has overtaken his body, because that's another thing that has happened. Yeast has taken over his body on the inside because his sugar levels are high, and yeast feeds off sugar. Look it up. They get that under control. Again, he's rehydrated. His insulins are under control. His sugar levels are under control. His diabetes is under control. By day 2, he's feeling really good. He's tired of being stuck. He's tired of hospital food. He's checking himself out. And then we start that process all over again. So he'll go 2-3 months before we have to go back to the ER, back to the hospital, back to sitting and waiting. So there are 2 hospitals we go back and forth between. They know him now very well. But I am his caregiver. And being his caregiver, the man that is extremely stubborn and has been from day 1, is one of the reasons why I am having a caregiver's crash. So, I appreciate you listening. Like I said, next episode will be about me and how I deal with all of this. And we'll go from there. Peace and blessings. Remember to walk in your purpose and know that I appreciate you.